Hello, everybody. Come on in. I'm so excited that you're here. I don't know about you. Good morning, Sharon, but I feel like I have not done a session like this in a really long time. And so I woke up this morning just really excited to be here and to be on and doing a session. So I am so glad that you guys are here with me this morning. I feel like this is kind of that lost time between Christmas and New Year's, and what better time to do a webinar. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Tammy. Hey, Gail. Hey, April and Missy and Danielle. Welcome, welcome. So we're going to go ahead and get started because it is 10 o'clock. As you're coming in, just say hello, say what grade you teach, and I want to give you a little bit of information. So this is a two-part series. So today we're going to be talking all about phonics, and I'm going to be sharing with you the components that are really necessary to execute a solid, explicit, systematic phonics lesson. So I'm going to be sharing that information with you today. And then tomorrow, I'm going to show you how to take that information and plug it into a lesson plan so that you are not spending hours upon hours planning small group lessons. Because here's the thing, we have way more to plan than just our phonics lessons, our small group phonics lessons, right? And so we need to be able to figure out a routine and a way to streamline that so that it doesn't take as long. So my goal for you at the end of this 2-day series is that you understand what important components go into a phonics lesson. You understand how to plug and play those activities easily so that you aren't spending a ton of time planning, and that you walk away feeling like you can walk into your classroom next week if you're going back next week or the week after and be prepared to teach these phonics components in your small group. So that's my goal for you, and I hope that you walk away being able to do that. So I also have some freebies for you. Today, I have a workbook for you. I sent that out. Hang on just a second. Let me adjust one thing very quickly. And okay. It looks like we reached capacity. So I'm going to fix that very quickly so everybody can get in. And I think that worked. So we will see if that allows everyone else to get in. That's exciting. All right. I think everyone's getting in now. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have for you the workbook, which I sent out, and I will drop that here if you did not get it. If you signed up late, I'll drop that for you. But then I'm also giving you a teacher's guide, and that teacher's guide is going to be your best friend. It's going to be what you look at and you read through to help you understand how to teach phonics in a small group, but also to streamline that lesson planning. So I'm going to give you that today. And then tomorrow, I have some free resources for you and the lesson plan template. So I'm excited to share all of that with you. All right, so I see first grade, kindergarten, second grade, intervention. Perfect. All right, let's get started. All right, so we are going to today understand, like I said, why phonics is important. We're going to explore some activities, and I'm going to show you what the lesson plan looks like that we're going to work on tomorrow. So phonics is how our students are able to make the connection between the sounds that we hear and the written form. And so that means even with letter sounds, as students are learning letter sounds, sometimes we separate the two, but letter sounds are phonics. It's the foundation. The letter sounds and that phonemic awareness are the foundation for our students so that we can continue to build these phonics skills. So it kind of builds upon each other. Okay, so it's how they take the sounds that they know and they apply them to the written form. Now, the written form can be in reading or it can be in writing. Good morning, Angie. All right. So I share this every single webinar because I think it is important. And it wasn't until probably my 10th time hearing about the brain and understanding how it worked that I really understood it and I could explain it to others. So sometimes I share things that I've shared before, but I think it's really important because even for me, the more I hear it, the more I can understand it and the more that I can explain it to other people. So we are born not knowing how to read, right? Our brains are not equipped learning how to read. So what we do as teachers, especially interventionists, kindergarten, first, second grade teachers, those foundational years, is we actually are reshaping the brain in a way that helps our students learn how to read, which is really cool if you think about it. So what we are born with, we're born with the phonological processor, which is this area here in the brain, and that's responsible for sound. So it's the sound part. We're also born with something known as the orthographic processor or the letter box. And that's how we recognize facial expressions. We recognize that mom is a mom, that a cat is a cat. And so we take in that information, we recognize it, and then we form a picture for it, right? So those two things are present, and also that meaning portion of your brain is also present at birth. But what is not present is something known as the phonological assembly. And I love that word assembly. I like to call it a factory because when I think about what we do as teachers and when we're giving explicit phonics instruction, we are building a factory in the brain that helps our students be able to read. And so I love that it's that the assembly piece, but I want you to think factory. And I want you to think that what happens is we take in the information and the sound. Okay, we connect it to a picture, right? Our letter. And when we do that, we are going back and forth. And as we're going back and forth, what we're doing is we are running our cars right through that factory. So we're teaching kids sound, but then we're also teaching them the letter. And when we're helping them connect the two, that is when we are building that and strengthening that portion of the brain known as the phonological assembly. And so it's really important that we form that part in the brain and we support our students through this process of orthographic mapping, and we support them through that process so that they can learn to become good decoders and good writers and learn to read for enjoyment. And so that is why it's so important that we teach this explicitly, because if we're teaching phonics explicitly, then what we're doing is we are kind of wearing a path back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And as we're wearing that path, we're building that factory for our students. So you will get all the information that you need on this and even a little bit more as far as the science of reading goes in that teacher's guide that I'm going to give you today. So it goes through the background and the research of why all of this is important and steps that you can take as teachers to support that process in the brain. So that is coming to you today. So when we're teaching phonics, we want to make sure that we are explicit, and we know that we want to be explicit because we're forming that part in the brain. We're helping our students become good readers and good writers, but we also want to make sure that we are systematic and sequential. And what I mean by that is we want to make sure that we are teaching students in a systematic way that builds upon the foundation that we've set forth for them. So think about it like this. If you are teaching, we have some preschool teachers in here, we have some kindergarten teachers in here. If you're teaching preschool or kindergarten, what's your job? What are you working on? Tell me. Early in the year kindergarten or in preschool when it applies to literacy, tell me some things in the chat that you're working on. Letter names and sounds, right? And you're working on that phonemic awareness piece. So why not, once they know how to blend and how to segment, Michelle says phonemic awareness, when they know how to blend and they know how to segment, and we've taught them letter sounds, then we're going to teach them how to take those two together, the phoneme and the grapheme, how to put those together and to read words, right? So it doesn't make sense to start teaching kids how to read words first. It makes sense to give them the foundation that they need to set up a system and make it in a logical sequential order so that they are able to learn how to read, right? So we start at the simple and we move to more complex. We make that phoneme grapheme connection and then we continue to make it. We make it with letter sounds, we make it with digraphs, we make it with vowel teams. We continue to build upon the knowledge that our students already have. So we know that in our language, there are 26 letters. Of those 26 letters, there are 5 vowels and 21 consonants. But what makes it tricky is that of those 26 letters, there are 44 sounds. 20 of those sounds are vowel sounds and 24 of those are consonant sounds. So we can't saddle up at our small group table and say, today, boys and girls, I am going to teach you all the ways to make the letter A. That doesn't make sense, right? So we have to make sure that we follow a scope and sequence. Some of us have a scope and sequence that we have to follow that is set forth for us through our district. And some of us are still looking for a scope and sequence, right? So if you're still looking for a scope and sequence, I have one that we use that aligns to the curriculum that we use, Foundations to Fluency, and it's all lined up for you. And the good part about that is that all of the resources then align with that scope and sequence as well. So here's just an example of why we wouldn't want to teach all of the sounds of A at one time. We want to start with simple and we want to move to more complex. So simple might be that short A, right? And then we might teach the open syllable that sometimes A can say but sometimes A says A, right? Then we might move into the CVCE pattern, right? That we know that the E makes the A say that long vowel sound that we know. And then we're going to gradually move into those vowel teams and diphthongs and that type of skill. So this is also provided for you. Everyone always asks me, we need a year at a glance. I understand that in kindergarten, I should be teaching letter names and sounds and phonemic awareness, but when? I understand that in kindergarten, I should probably introduce my students to digraphs, but when, right? And I know that it's probably time to start teaching syllables in second grade, first grade, but when? And so what I did is I took the phonics scope and sequence that we use, and I separated this out for my teachers so that we had a guide throughout the year to know this is about where our students should be. Now, we are in January, and most students should be blending and segmenting CVC words, right? That is our goal at our school, is for our students to be able to do that. Most of our students can do that because we built that foundation for them, but we still have students who are struggling with that. So they're going to get exposure to this CVC blending in their whole group setting. But when we're working with them in small group, guess what? We're still drilling those letter sounds, but we're also making sure that even though they know about, I think most of them know about 16 letter sounds. We have 3 that we're working with. Of those 16 letter sounds, they can also blend and segment. So we're not stopping them from blending and segmenting and reading the words with their known sounds. So when you look at this, I don't want you to feel, if you are a first grade teacher and you're not teaching CVCE words yet, that's okay. Introduce it to your students in whole group, but make sure that you are meeting your students where they are in small group. And the way that you can make sure you're meeting your students where they are in small group is just by giving them a quick temperature check, right? Just giving them a quick spelling test for the skills that you are teaching in first grade, and you want to see where they are and where do they fall on that scope and sequence. And that's the beauty of having a scope and sequence, because if you can give your students an assessment, then you can quickly Can you guys hear me now? Everybody hear me better? Okay. Whew, Gotta love technology. Okay, I'm not sure where I lost you guys at, but thank you for letting me know. So, what I was talking about is having that scope and sequence and knowing where your students fall after you give that assessment. So, I'm going to give you a scenario, and I want you to tell me in the chat where you think your students might start. So, remember, when you give an assessment, you want to know what they know. You want to know what they don't know, and you want to know what they're using but confusing. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what student A understands. Student A is able to read and spell CVC words. They are struggling with E and I. They're using but confusing that E and I. Okay, they have no knowledge whatsoever of blends, but they do have some knowledge of digraphs. So SH and CH, they're using a little bit of SH and CH, but they're also confusing those two. So tell me in the chat where you think you would start instruction for those students. I'm going to say it one more time. So they have knowledge of CVC words, confusing E and I. They have knowledge of digraphs, but they're confusing SH and CH, and they have no knowledge of blends. Okay, so you want to start instruction with where they are using but confusing those phonics patterns. So tell me in the chat where you might start with them. Rachel says maybe start to review digraphs and a vowel intensive with E and I. Yes. Digraphs with E and I, digraphs, vowels take priority, maybe do some vowel intensives. Yes. And so I love that you guys are not waiting and holding your students back and just focusing on CVC words, because they're using and confusing digraphs as well. So you can introduce digraphs to your students because that's where you want to start, but you can support the short vowel piece by practicing those short vowels with digraphs, but also by doing a vowel intensive, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Good job, guys. Yes. Okay, and I love this quote, and I'm sorry if you hear me say it all the time, but it's really important because when we're thinking about that scope and sequence and we're thinking about the systematic and explicit piece, we have to remember that we can't forget that we are teaching children sounds, and the most important thing that we can do is connect the phoneme to the grapheme. And so by doing that, we're helping and we're giving students the roadmap that they need to be able to sound out all kinds of words. But if we teach words in isolation only, then we're only teaching those words in isolation. And eventually the mental capacity within their little brains is they're not going to have enough room to remember all of those words, right? So we need to teach them the sounds so that they can then crack that code and decode any word that we put in front of them. All right. So now let's talk about the explicit piece. And this is the most important piece, I think, because we want to make sure that if we're taking time out of our literacy block to do small group instruction with our students, it needs to be explicit, it needs to be meaningful, it needs to be quick, but it also needs to hit the students where they are, right? We need to meet them where they are. That is the purpose of a small group lesson. And we want to be consistent. And this is the piece that I feel like when I work with teachers, when I go to school districts, when I work with individual schools or individual teachers, the consistency piece is what it trips us up a little bit. And that's because there are so many resources out there, so much noise about phonics instruction. All with one quick Google search of phonics instruction or one quick search on Pinterest of phonics instruction, you can walk away feeling really overwhelmed and not knowing what you need to teach. And so what I try to do when I support teachers is say, keep it consistent, keep it easy, keep it simple. Don't choose a whole bunch of activities to do. I always tell my teachers at my school, Pinterest Fridays, right? If you want to play a game, I have a first grade teacher who loves to play phonics Jenga. And if you want to know more about that, it's super fun. And I will tell you about it. Just send me a message on Instagram or email me and I will tell you what she does because it's super fun. But Pinterest is for Fridays, right? Do something fun on Fridays if you want to, but keep the main thing within your small group. Okay. So choose activities that are going to connect to the phoneme to the grapheme, those activities that are going to make sure that students are connecting the sound to the symbol. You want to make sure that you are giving students lots and lots of time to apply, but you're also making sure that you're pulling in the review. So Wiley Blevins tells us two things. He tells us a lot of things, but two things that always stick with me when I'm thinking about phonics instruction. The first thing he says is that it takes 4 to 6 weeks for students to really grasp a concept. So I don't know about you, but I spend about a week teaching a phonics skill and then I move on, right? So if it takes 4 to 6 weeks to make it stick for our students, then what we need to be doing is we need to be building in that cumulative review piece for them for 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm going to say again, having that scope and sequence, it's so easy because you can just check off what you've done. And then as you're lesson planning, you can say, okay, I have nailed down short vowels. I have done that for 4 to 6 weeks. I've done the quick checks. My kids have it. They know it in a snap. I'm going to pull that out because now I'm going to be pulling in some CBCE patterns and I'm going to kind of start switching things in and out a little bit. And so by knowing where you've come from and where you're going, that makes that cumulative review piece really easy. And the other thing that Wiley Blevins tells us is that we as teachers do a really good job teaching the stuff. We teach the phonics skills really well, right? We have that piece down. But what we struggle with is making sure that we're making time to apply that as well. And so if you've ever sat down, I'm so guilty of this. I will sit down at a small group table. I'll get into, say like phoneme grapheme mapping, for example. I'll get into that and I'll just be working through that. And then our time is up. And then I didn't give my students any time to read in context. And that's our ultimate goal, right? And research really tells us too that spending too much time in isolation, isolating these skills away from reading and writing can be harmful to our students. So we want to be quick with our phonics warm up. We want to be quick with that explicit teaching piece. We want to make sure they have it, but then we want to reserve some time for our students to really practice that through decodables, that connected text and dictation. And so creating systems that are consistent to say, okay, I know that every Thursday and Friday, the majority of my lesson is going to be working through that decodable with my students. Or I know that I'm going to be really heavy on the phonemic awareness warm-up piece Monday and Tuesday, but then I'm going to stop and I'm going to really focus on the cumulative review piece. I'm going to give time to do the blending drills and the visual drills and that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to make time for dictation on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that's what I'm going to help you with tomorrow, is really taking all the things that we have, making it consistent, making a routine for putting it into a lesson plan and making it easy for you. All right, speaking of routines, we're getting ready to get into the routine piece. I want to pause for just a minute because I feel like I'm so excited to be here. I'm talking really fast. So if there are any questions, I would love for you to ask those now. All right, I'm going to keep going. Oh, here we go. Helen says, if they aren't ready for full decodables, can the application piece can use the word level or the sentence? Yes, and we're going to talk about that. So I think we get really caught up on a decodable having to be a book or a passage, and it doesn't have to be. In kindergarten, guess what our decodables are right now? Our decodables are those little tiny cards that are words in isolation. I don't think I have any here with me. But they're just the little tiny cards, words in isolation. That's our decodable, right? And then we might move to the sentence level or the sentence pyramid level. So yes, Helen, that's a great question. I think we have to accept where our students are, and we just have to make sure that they are applying that knowledge to where they are on their journey. Laurel, we're going to talk about small groups. Tammy, we're going to talk about small groups. So I'm going to give you a couple different options tomorrow when we think about where you are. I would like to do a quick poll really quickly because I would like to know how much time most people have for small groups. I'm going to do a poll real quick. How long do you have? So 10, 15, 20, 30. Okay, so the first one, I want to know, even if it's 5 days a week or it's 3 days a week or whatever you have, I just want to know the time that you have when you're able to sit down with your kiddos. So I'm going to send that poll out right now. Okay, so looks like about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, and you can absolutely do a phonics lesson in 15 to 20 minutes. And now I want to know how many days a week you're able to meet with your students. All right, let's look at that one really quick because that's a really good question. So how many days are you able to meet with your students? So 4 to 5, that's fantastic. I suggest that you, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow. We're going to look at breaking everything up. And I just want to say also quickly that my kids are home, and so you may hear or see them. And if you do, I'm sorry. So we're going to talk about timing, but we're also going to talk about how you can meet with the students that are on grade level, for lack of better words, a couple times a week, but you could meet with your lower students, the ones that really need you and really need that tier 2 intervention with someone else. You want to try to meet with them at least 4 times a week if you can. And so that might be 4 times a week and it might only be 10 minutes, and that's okay. Or it might be 3 times a week and it might be 15 minutes. And so we're really going to dive in and talk about that tomorrow. And I have lesson plan templates for you that I'm going to share with you that kind of give you some timing guidelines to help you know, like, okay, this phonemic awareness activity takes 3 minutes and this warm up takes 5 minutes. I have 10 minutes, and how you can kind of divide that up. So I will share that with you. Oh, thank you, Beth. Oh, I think I can. Yes, I can. Let's see. There you go. How's that? All right. If you do your whole group slides, can I skip some? Yes. So and that's the other thing I want to talk about, and we're going to dive into this tomorrow, so I don't want to get too far into that piece of it. But if you are doing a visual drill, a blending drill, an auditory drill in your whole group setting, then do you necessarily need to do it as long in your small group? Probably not. It just depends on where your kids are and who needs that support. And then Michelle says she has 2 groups a day, 5 days a week. So typically I only see kiddos 2 days. Interventionists see them 2 days as well. I think that's perfect. And so, Michelle, that's when you can really sit down and talk with that interventionist and say, you know, are we teaching the same skills? How can we make sure that we're hitting them twice with these skills, right? I did a podcast interview with Stephanie Stoller yesterday, and we were talking all about MTSS, and she's amazing. And so we were talking about how that tier 2 intervention has to be in addition to and not instead of. And so having conversations about what routines you have in place in your classroom and what routines the interventionist has in place and how those two can merge so that the student really is getting a double dose of what you're trying to teach them, right? So having that collaboration and that meeting with your team and the people in your building is really, really important. Okay, let's talk about routines. So what I have given you, and I will drop these in the downloads at the end, this is what I give my teachers. And this is what I say to them. Nobody likes a scripted plan. If you do, that's great. But kids don't want us sitting in front of them reading from a script, right? But we have to know what to say, and we have to understand and process the activities that we're going to do before we sit down in front of our students. So I have these grab and go lessons that I have given my teachers, and this is I call this their Cliff Note version, right? Here are all the activities that you can do. And what I want you to do is I want you to plug and play. I want you to pull out what you're going to do on Monday. I want you to copy, paste it, stick it in your lesson plan, right? I want you to utilize these because they're helpful. When you're thinking about phonemic awareness and you're doing a phonemic awareness, if you're teaching short U, then you want your phonemic awareness, your blending, and your segmenting to align with the short U. Why? Because we're warming up their brain through the sound so that later when we connect it to the symbol, they are able to connect why they're there and what we're working on, right? Same thing with a visual drill. So if you're doing a visual drill, you want to make sure that you've already mapped out what letters you're going to teach them, right? Or what letters you're going to review with them. And so if they're learning short U, you're not going to have an AY sound card in your visual drill deck because they haven't learned that yet. And think about blending drills. Blending drills can be really tricky to come up with. So can word chaining. Word chaining can make a person crazy because you want to make sure that you're teaching the skill, right? That they're only chaining words that are either the skill that they're learning or a skill that they've previously learned, and you don't want those other skills included in that. So all of that takes up so much time when you're lesson planning. I mean, to sit down and think of, if you're doing 5 small group lessons and they're all in a different phonics skill and you have to come up with word chains for all of those, that's what takes up so much of your time. That takes up your time. Dictation takes up your time. Those are the kind of things that I want you to be able to have at your fingertips so that you can cut and paste and stick it into your lesson plan and then focus on what matters most, which is really focusing on your students and understanding what they know and how you can support them as readers. And so having this routine in place is really, really important. So when you're looking at this, I want you to remember this isn't a script for you to sit down at your small group table and do. This is your plug and play. This is your grab and go. Now I can go plan my lesson. So now we're going to take a look at what those routines are. So a good phonics lesson is going to have all of these components. Now I want to say it's not going to have all of these components all in the same day, all in one sitting, okay? And I think that is a misconception. And I think when we put that out there, we aren't really considering the teacher in the classroom and how much time they actually have. And because I'm a practitioner and because I'm working in the classroom with teachers, I realize that, you know what, it's perfect on paper to feel like I have 20 minutes with all of my groups every single day, but then little Johnny's having a meltdown on the carpet, right? And Sally can't do work independently. So she's sitting behind me at my table with her bin of things that she's working on. And then the interventionist is coming in to grab her students, and the admin's coming in to observe me. And so all of those things we have to think about, and we have to give ourselves grace and say, you know what? I am not going to try to get through every single component every single day, because then I'm just throwing stuff at my students. I want you to think quality over quantity. Now, throughout the week, tomorrow we're going to talk about what things need to be in your week. What does your week look like? All of these things should show up in your phonics lesson at some point within your lesson, right? Within that week. But I'm going to show you how you can break some of these apart and give yourself a little bit of grace to say, I'm going to make sure that when I do that visual drill, that I'm in it and I'm not just throwing a bunch of stuff at them and moving on to the next task, right? That's where that explicit piece comes in. All right, so let's take a look at what is included in our phonics lesson. So I always like to start my lesson with, yeah, Mary Beth, it really is a struggle. It is, and I see it every single day with teachers, and so we just have to remember that. Okay, so I always like to start my lesson with a phonemic awareness warm-up, and as I said, we want to make sure we're connecting whatever phonics skill we're teaching, that we're connecting it also to the phonics skill that we're going to be working on, right? So we'll start with a quick warm up. You guys are asking about timing. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow. This says a 3-minute warm up. Y'all, it doesn't take 3 minutes. It takes maybe 2, right? We're just warming them up and we're moving on. And so research tells us that the 2 most important phonemic awareness components that we can do to get our kids reading and writing is blending and segmenting. So we want to make sure that we're doing some blending work. We want to make sure that we're doing some segmenting work to warm up their brains, and then we're going to move on. So the 3-part drill is something that I learned. This is a strategy that I learned in my Orton Gillingham training, and it is phenomenal. Okay. It can take a lot of time. And so when we look at lesson planning tomorrow and we look at dividing pieces up, I'm going to show you how to divide that up. But for today, I'm just going to show you what they look like, right? So an auditory drill is when you're taking the letter sounds that your students know. You're taking the ones that they know and you're asking them to write those. So you can use sand if you want to. After teaching kindergarten, I swore that I would never, ever use sand again. Because it is a little bit messy, but you can have them write it on a whiteboard. You can have, their little Etch-a-Sketch things at the Dollar Tree that give a little bit of bumpy feedback. You can use those. And so it sounds something like this. How do you spell And as students are writing with correct letter formation, the letter M says Okay, so they're writing and saying. Research supports having students write and say at the same time. Okay, so that's an auditory drill. A visual drill is when you have cards, and again, you're only going to be working on the cards that your students or the sounds that your students know. So I just have a stack of cards that I use, and I will flip through them. So if my kids have learned all of their consonants, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this stack, and they're going to say s, t, and we're going to flip through them. Okay. What I do for the blending drill then is as I'm flipping, and I'm happy to give you a code. One of my kindergarten teachers this year was brilliant in figuring out a blending drill. So what she does is she writes on the back of her visual drill cards, she'll write a 1, a 2, or a 3. Okay. And Helen, you're on here. Helen, will you please remind me to send out the code for these for people so that they have them. And so what she would do is whether the position that it needed to be in for a blending drill. So if it was an X, obviously words don't usually start with X. They do, but not words that we're teaching kindergarten, first, second grade. So that would be third position. A vowel sound would be second position. S could be first position or last position. And so when you do that, then when you're laying them down like 1, 2, 3, and then you can flip them up on your blending board, and it makes it really easy to just go through and flip. So when you're blending here's my blending board. So after I've created my stacks from my visual drill, I will get my blending board, and then we're just going to read bit. Okay. And then we're going to pull one card at a time down and have them read. There would be other cards behind it. So that's an easy way to do your blending drill. Guess what? Another easy way, I see that Missy says she has a hard time having the correct cards for the correct groups. Another easy way is just to write it on a whiteboard, right? Just to write on a whiteboard what they are, and then do a couple blending drills with them. Okay. We don't want to forget about review. Okay. And when I say review, that could be something as simple as a fluency grid. It could be reviewing those high frequency words that we've explicitly taught, right? So we want to make sure we pull that in that warm up piece of our lesson. Angie says she uses green, yellow, and red pencils on the back for each position. I love that. That's a great idea. Okay, thank you, Helen. All right, so what we want, we were talking about earlier, we were talking about kids using but confusing E and I, and you guys may have seen in the chat where people were saying a vowel intensive. If you've never heard of a vowel intensive, it is also an Orton Gillingham approach. And basically, it's just practicing the vowel sounds. And so what we like to do is I have given my teachers a sheet, and it is just has everything on here for them. So we call it levels. We say we have 3 levels. Okay, boys and girls, it's like a video game. Level 1, the sound is ah. And everybody, they just use a paper clip or they can use a chip and they clip it and they say, A says ah. So they get really good at that. And I'm like, okay, everybody, who's ready for level 2? And level 2 is the vowel consonant level. So I might say, okay, boys and girls, the sound is M. What sound do you hear? M. I says right? And then level 3 is the CVC syllable. Now, as I'm sitting here, I'm realizing the vowel strip that I have here for this this slide is not the vowel strip that we use anymore, because we know that E can be tricky, and we know that I can also be tricky. So we want to be very careful with the visuals that we choose to represent vowels, especially. And so I'll hold this up so you guys can see it. These are really good picture representations for vowels. So A, apple, is fine. E, we have to be careful because some people say egg, but some people say egg, which can be tricky. So we use edge because it's the purest sound. I, itchy. Okay. O, otter. And then U, up. We see umbrella sometimes, but it is kind of that, when we say umbrella, we kind of hear the there as well. So we want to be careful of that. And so practicing doing a quick vowel intensive with our students can really make it stick for them. I live, if you can't tell from my accent, I live in a rural area. And so we have some confusion with E and I because it sounds the same. And I always tell my kids, I'm like, I know, I get it. I'm not going to go to the store to get some milk. I'm going to the store to get some milk. And that's how we say it, right? And so we have to be very careful when we're teaching to help support those vowel sounds with our students. And so one thing that I do is I just make up a sound for each. And so I tell students to put their hand under their chin. And if they hear the I sound, their nose scrunches, but their chin doesn't drop. So if you want to practice with me, say I, your chin doesn't drop. Now say your chin drops. So if the word is med, put your hand under your chin. Med. Oh, I know it's an E because my chin dropped. If the word is pig, pig. When I got to that vowel sound, my chin didn't drop, so I know that it is an I. So that's just a tip for a vowel intensive. Melissa says, is there a point when I should take the pictures off of my vowel intensive strips for first grade? I don't think so. I think it supports them, and I think that that's okay. All right. So now we're moving into the focused part of the lesson, right? So we've done our cumulative review, phonemic awareness. We've worked on the warm-up piece of our lesson. And now it's time to really work on that focused skill. Now remember, we want to keep this brief. We want to keep the activities consistent, and we want to make sure that we are connecting the sound to symbol whenever possible. Those are the kind of activities that we want to choose. Okay, here are my big 3. My big 3 that I stick with all the time are the phoneme grapheme mapping. For the younger students, it's the segment and write. I'll show you what those look like. Word chaining, and Wiley tells us the application piece. Now, what I hear a lot when I'm working with schools and school districts is that teachers will say, well, that's boring. Do phoneme grapheme mapping every day? Do word chaining every day or every Monday or every Tuesday? And my answer is always this. It's only boring if you as the teacher make it boring. I have a whole cart full of ways to make it fun and engaging for students, right? So when we're doing decoding, I might have them put on these glasses, and those are their decoding glasses, and they're going to wear those today, but I'm not going to bring them back till next week, right? So I might have them use a witch finger to point as they're reading. I might have them use foam cubes to push as they're segmenting and writing on, this week, but next week they might use these beads, right? The little beads on the sliders. So it's all about making it fun and engaging, because you can do the same activity and kids don't know they're doing the same activity. Sometimes all you have to do is switch out your erasers. Like when I go back, we've been using holiday erasers. And now when we go back, I just picked up some snowflake erasers at Michael's, and that's what we're going to use for our phoneme grapheme mapping. So it's about making it fun for students, but keeping it simple for you so that your planning is easier. All right. So I have outlined in the guide I'm going to drop for you today at the end of this session, I have outlined all of the activities that you can do with students and how to do them, why they're important, questions that you ask, all the things. So those are going to be available for you as well. Hey, Beth, just message me. I would love to do an engagement webinar. That would be fun. So message me, Beth, and remind me, because I could do one on just showing you how to use and make it fun. All right. And then we want to make sure that we are including irregular words in our lesson. And here's what I'm going to say about heart words. There's so many different scope and sequences out there for heart words. My suggestion to you is that you choose heart words, high frequency words, based on a couple things. So in kindergarten, we teach the first 12 the old-fashioned way. Okay. Is it great? No. Do they have to have some sight words before March? Yeah, they do, right? But then what we do is we take those words, even those 12 that we are teaching the old-fashioned way, and we plug them into our scope and sequence, because we're going to teach kids also how to map those sounds. So an example of this would be the word said. I might teach my students the word said in kindergarten, right? The old-fashioned way. But then when we get to short E, I'm going to say, do you boys and girls, do you remember that word said? Let's look at that word said and let's map that out. Now I see that AI makes that sound, right? But that's the part we have to know by heart. And so I'm teaching them that, but I'm also making sure that I am pulling those high frequency words in where they fit within the scope and sequence, right? So maybe the word from might need to be in short U, or the word what might need to be with digraphs after teaching short U. So just think of it that way, because we want to make sure that we're including those in our instruction. Oh, thank you, Michelle. And so then Wiley says application is key, right? So we have to make sure that we are making time for application, and that is in decoding and in dictation. And so as Helen brought up earlier, it doesn't have to be a text. We can do, it can be a text, and we can do sentences, we can do sentence pyramids, we can do words in isolation. It just depends on where your students are. And because you're here today and you're live, I am working on really hard, working on nonfiction decodable books that go along with the scope and sequence for all of my phonics bundles. Okay. It's taking a long time because I want them to be perfect, and I want them to be, I want kids to love them, and I want kids to I want them to look at the book and say, I can't wait to learn about foxes, or I can't wait to learn about pigs. And so it's taking me longer than I'd hoped, but I am going to give you tomorrow, I'm going to give you the short vowel set, just because you're here and you're live. So that is a little treat for you. But it doesn't have to be decodables, okay? It doesn't have to be the decodable text. It can be sentences. So here are all the different ways that we use sentences. We use sentences for this game here on the left is just like a splat game. They have to read the sentence. Jill had a spell and fell on the hill. Okay, if they read it correct, they get to keep it. If they don't read it correctly, they stick it in the bottom of the stack, and the next student goes. They can pull a card again. When they pull the card, if they pull like splat, then they lose all their cards. It's kind of like kaboom or bang. And kids like that. It's fun. And guess what? They're still reading, right? This is just a sheet with decodable sentences. So they just practice reading. Once they get good, I might give them a timer, and I might say, okay, how many times can you read through this before the timer goes off? Or I might give them Unifix cubes and say, okay, for every time you read a sentence, I want you to stack a Unifix cube. How tall can your stack be before my timer goes off? Mix and fix sentences are great because you have them touch and read, and then you have them cut that sentence apart, mix it up, and put it back together. And then what I like to do in small group is before they leave me, I have them use their dictation notebooks, and I'll have them glue the mix and fix sentence down. And then I say, great. And I'll go back and draw an illustration that matches the sentence. And so that's another idea for a decodable. More ideas for decodables, okay? You can read sentences. I love these for kindergarten because it provides a touch point for students, and sometimes they need that, but that is a scaffold that we want to remove, right? And then these sentence pyramids were like game changer. Laurel, I think you're on here. Laurel was one of my kindergarten teachers last year, and she left and went to another school, and I miss her so much. But she helped me create these because we were struggling to have students go from isolation, words in isolation, to the sentence level. So then we said, okay, so how can we get them there? And these sentence pyramids were the bridge to get students to reading a full sentence, because they read one sentence or one word. Sam has a fat cat. And they're great because that is the bridge for reading sentences. But guess what? It also builds fluency, right? They're reading that word Sam how many times? They're reading over and over and over again, right? So it helps build fluency. And then you can also just do roll and read. Kids love roll and read. And I tell my teachers, hey, Friday, Pinterest Friday, grab that roll and read. That's your decodable, right? That's what they're going to do when they come to the small group table while they're warming up, right? Before you get into the lesson. And then finally, we want to look at dictation. And so dictation is something, I'll be honest with you, that I didn't think was necessary. I didn't think that there was a place for it. I don't know why. When I taught first grade, I didn't do dictation, but I didn't. And I really regret that. And so what we do for dictation is we have we took the primary notebooks. This is just a primary composition notebook, and we took it to the print shop and had them cut it in half. And so that way because they're not going to use the whole thing right away. And so you can see they just have where they're writing their sentences. And so they know, we'll just put a little paper clip on there, and they know where to start for the next day. So dictation is really, really important. And the thing to remember with dictation is you want to make sure that you're giving them, this is why that scope and sequence and having a plan is so important, because you want to make sure that what you give them for dictation, they know the high frequency words, but they also are having to write words that are decodable that you're working on, and words that you've previously worked on. You're bringing in that cumulative review piece. So you want to make sure that those sentences are there too. And so I have in this guide I'm going to drop for you today, I have some dictation. So here are the steps for dictation. And then right here, it's really small, but it's a bigger sheet for you in the guide, is the student dictation cheat sheet. So this is one of those, like, if the student does this, then if the student does this, then try this. If the student writes this, then try this. So that's there for you to look through so that you have that. So Molly, I typically do dictation about 3 days a week. And when we look at the planning tomorrow, I'll show you what that looks like, because dictation, I might do just words on Tuesday. And then as we get to the end of the week, like Thursday and Friday, then I'm going to be doing a sentence, maybe 2 sentences. I'm going to free up some of that time so that I can make sure that I'm making time to do that dictation. Because here's what else. I use that dictation towards the end of the week as a quick check, because I want to know if my students can read that decodable and they can write that dictated sentence, I can move on to the next phonics skill. I'm going to continue to go back and review, right, with that cumulative review piece. But that dictation, this book is amazing. Here's your quick check right here. Right here. Here's your spelling test, right? You've got it if you want to know if they have it. All right. And so again, we just want to make sure that we're reviewing, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow. a little bit more. So tomorrow we're going to take this lesson plan template, and I'm going to stop sharing very quickly because I want to show you what that lesson plan is going to look like. Let me see here if I can pull it up. So I will send this out tonight so that you guys have it. But here's what I've created for you. Okay. So you have your, and this shouldn't be on here. I was working on figuring out if we could do a drop, like I still haven't figured that out yet. So you have just your plain lesson plan that you can type into. Okay. You have a sample lesson. So you were asking about dictation. So here I did a sentence on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And what you'll notice we'll talk about tomorrow is look how heavy the skill piece is here and how that kind of fades away. And look what we're doing. We're focusing on that decoding and application piece. And then I've also given like some suggested times here, but then also about how long certain things should take throughout the week so that if you know how much time you have left or how much time you have with a student, you can kind of base it on that based on your phonics lesson. All right. Let's see if I covered everything. I sure did. Okay. So do you guys have questions before we meet tomorrow? I'm going to go right now and drop the stuff you need that I promised you while I'm waiting for questions. All right. I'm going to drop the workbook link right now. Right, there's the drop there. What I just dropped is your workbook. And now I'm going to drop your teacher's guide. So in the workbook, there are some guiding questions that I would like for you to think about before we meet tomorrow. So think about your students, pick a group of students that you're wanting help with. I want you to pick them, and then I want you to really use those guiding questions in that workbook to think through and process before we meet again tomorrow. Oh, thank you. Thank you guys so much. Oh, well, you know what, Megan? You just needed to sleep for sure. For sure. Megan, email me, okay? Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you, Michelle. Oh, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you being here. I am excited to be here too. I'm going to go ahead and give you the lesson plan so that you can look over that too. Let me see. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give you that lesson plan that I was just looking at so that you have it and you can look over it for tomorrow. All right, so you should just be able to click on the link that I'm dropping and it'll download. Chrome did an update recently, so it downloads up at the top of the screen, that little arrow there on the bottom if you're using Chrome. All right, I'll stick around if you have any other questions, and if not, I will plan on seeing you tomorrow. Thank you, Tammy. I'm so sorry I lost Laurel too, but I'm glad you guys love her. She's the best. I hope to see you guys soon. I think I'm going to come and do a training for you guys soon, Tammy. Thank you, Stacy. Yes. Okay. I'm definitely going to do an engagement one because that's my jam for sure. Lori, I'd love to hear your thoughts on organizing meeting with some students more often throughout the week than other students. I'm in kindergarten. I have 1 hour each day. Lori, I'd love to talk to you about that. You have an hour for small groups. We can make it happen for sure. Molly, our district actually uses My Foundations to Fluency curriculum. That's what we use. It was actually approved by the state of Virginia. So we're able to use it in our district, which is kind of cool. See you tomorrow. Yes, Melissa. So you want to show them, you want to give them direct feedback with that dictation piece. So you want to let them dictate, you want to dictate the sentence, and then you want to be quiet. You want to let them write. And then what you want to do is you want to go back and have them reread the sentence and see if they can catch the error. If they can't catch the error, then you want to point the direction to it. So if they spelled the word, say, pig, P-E-G, for example, you would say, okay, you said this word is pig. Listen to me sound it out. P-E-G, peg. The word is p-e-g. Can you fix that? So you want to kind of give them that direct instruction. And that's in that dictation cheat sheet. It'll help you with that too, Melissa. Oh, thank you, Megan. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. I'm happy to email out. I'm happy to email. Give me till tomorrow morning and I will email those out to you. Sure. Yep. And Bridget, if you email me, I can send you the link. Oh, thank you. Thanks for being en route to reading. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, if you're not in the Route to Reading membership, it is, you can find all of this stuff, and we do trainings like this once a month. So I would love for you to consider joining us. Oh, yay, Beth. I'm glad so many Route to Reading people are here. Oh, thanks, Christy. I have some really good interviews on the podcast coming, and I'm really, really excited about it. Yeah, I will while you're still here. Those of you that are still here, I'll drop the Route to Reading. This is, so after January 1st, the Route to Reading membership pricing will go up. So if you're interested and you've been thinking about it, now's the time to do it because it's $15 a month right now. But it's going to go up to $17 January 1st. So I'll drop that link if you're interested. I'll drop the podcast link too. It is Route to Reading is the podcast. And I'll drop that for you too. Oh, thank you, Mary Beth. Yeah, so I dropped the Route to Reading and I dropped the podcast. And so those are both there. And then Bridget, email me and I'll make sure that I get those, the links to you. All right, I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here. It was a great way to spend my morning, and I hope that you found it helpful and beneficial, and I will see you tomorrow.